Can you guys hear me if I just keep the mic like this and promise to use my, awesome. Thank you, Gina. Pete, thank you for this. And thank you, Pepperdine, for bringing this cross-sector group together. You know, before I jump in, I confess, I wasn't here in the morning. By a show of hands, how many of you are here from the academic sector? One. How many are here from the business sector? All right, a handful. Philanthropic sector. All right, a couple. And then, who am I missing? The nonprofit sector. Government. Oh, thank you. And how many are you here from government? And do I have any of my LA County folks in the room? Aw. Well, from the LA County government.
Region, city.
From the city of Los Angeles. Okay.
El Monte, another city.
Another city. We have 88 cities in the county of Los Angeles. So I will try and be quick with my story of self, both for myself and for the center, because part of what we do in the center is we bring our partners together to tell their stories and help them do their work better together. And I have two of the best partners, one from each sector, John Cabara from California Community Foundation and Cindy Harding from Department of Public Health. My quick story of self is that I started in the public sector. I was a Bruin, much like John, went to Washington, D.C. to work for Congressman Henry Waxman, and decided then and there that I wanted to dedicate my life to public service. I landed back out here for bunches of different reasons, working at a private law firm, Munger, Tolles & Olson, and then went into child advocacy work. So I have a cross-sector background. The origin story for the center starts back in the city of Los Angeles. Mayor Villaraigosa wanted to work more closely with the private sector, and he tasked a woman named Tori Osborne with starting an Office of Strategic Partnerships in the city of Los Angeles. They brought the public and the private sector together for the city of Los Angeles. The city of Newark has one of these, the city of Detroit has one of them, a couple of states do, and obviously the federal government was an innovator in this as well. Well, when Villaraigosa got termed out, Mayor Garcetti came in and he decided to do something a little different. So there was a bit of a vacuum in this metropolitan area. Around that same time, we had a death in our child welfare system. And the county came together, commissioned a blue ribbon report, which said the county of Los Angeles needs to do a better job working together, and not only does the county itself need to work better together, we need to bring in the private sector. And that vacuum that had been created, people wanting to do public-private partnerships and hadn't been able to, or wanting an entity to help them come together, said, you know what, we have an idea. This has never been tried in the county of Los Angeles before. In fact, to our knowledge, it's never been tried in any county anywhere. But why don't we start a center within the county of Los Angeles that's original? Let's do it as a pilot because we're not sure if this darn thing's gonna work. We are, by the way, the largest county in the entire country, 10 million people, 4,000 square miles. We are $30 billion budget. We are the state of Illinois. So it was reasonable for them to start this as a pilot to say, you know, we're ginormous. Can we, as a public and a private sector, truly come together and get anything done? So on April 1st, 2016, so 2.5 years ago to the day, I was hired as the center's first director to bring the public and the private sectors together. We very much are not fundraisers. We very much are that place that can build the speed of trust. I've heard that talked about a lot. We bring our partners to the table with private sector know-how, private sector investment, but private sector, in private sector, less urgency. John Cabara actually is somebody who brings that urgency more than most people in the room, together with a system that, like I said, $30 billion, and real know-how how to get things done, and real problems that their money, even though it's $30 billion, can't necessarily solve. So in the 2.5 years that we've been in existence, we've helped 24 private sector partners partner with 7 county agencies, plus our housing authority, plus First 5 Los Angeles, to co-invest over $4 million. 100% of that going to support the county, being leveraged by the county, 0 of that going to the county itself. It goes to provide technical assistance to our county departments to help them innovate. It goes to fund pilots that are things that the county says we want to do, but we don't have, we can't risk it. Or it goes to fund evaluations with the county saying, we're doing this new thing, but we need to know it works before we decide if we're going to invest further. As an example of some of the things we've done, kids exiting the foster care system are more likely to be able to find housing because we've helped, through private sector dollars, bring our housing sector together with our child welfare sector. Families down in South Los Angeles have an easier time being foster parents because through private sector investment, we've we've been able to bring the faith community to the table in a way that isn't, usually it's not a no-brainer, or it is a no-brainer, but the county has trouble developing those relationships, so we've been able to help bring the faith sector into this space, and one that's near and dear to my heart and near and dear to Cindy's heart too. Moms on public welfare now, for the first time ever in Los Angeles County, have access to evidence-based home visiting services, coaching services that will help to strengthen them and keep their families together. So, as Jamie mentioned, we've been a success. Our partners really like to work together, and on September 18th, just a little over 3 weeks ago, the Board of Supervisors voted to make the center a permanent part of county government. We will be moved into the Chief Executive Office, which is sort of, it's the CEO, it's what you would think of as a CEO. Our scope is going to expand to include things like immigration and homelessness. And we are going to engage in a 6-month strategic planning process to figure out exactly what that's going to look like. We are currently, and will continue to be, half funded by the County of Los Angeles, and then half funded by the private sector. There are 15 foundations. CCF is one of them. The Parsons Foundation is another, that are core center funders, and we will continue that model going forward. Because our key to success is having a foot in both sectors. We are the translators. We are the ones that, because these are very, very different worlds. We help folks speak each other's language. We help them understand each other's culture. We help them understand each other as humans. And so it will be very important going forward that we continue to have that cross-sector foot in both fields. And with that, I am really, really excited to then turn this over to my partners. John Cabarra, he is the Vice President or the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at California Community Foundation. John has spent 35 years in the public sector, in the public, the private, the nonprofit, the social innovation sector, helping to achieve social justice. He is a former Coral Fellow, a Bruin, although he also has some Trojan credentials too. He got his MBA from USC and a master's from Occidental. And then Cindy Harding, who is the, Deputy Director at Department of Public Health. She's spent over 30 years in Department of Public Health and has been somebody who has seen the value of public-private partnerships since before the center was even a twinkle in anybody's eye. The other thing to know about Cindy is that she is a musician, and she plays with her husband and also her sister in bands on a regular basis. So John and Cindy, thank you so much for joining me on this panel. Okay, so Cindy, I'm going to start with you. As I said, you have been doing public-private partnerships since, I don't know if it was your first days at Department of Public Health, so I would love for you to share with our friends here, what is it that you see as the value in bringing the private sector into the work you're doing? And then part 2 of that question is, what have you seen as the advantage of having a center help the county do this, and what do you hope to see going forward?
So it's a great question, Kate, and let me say hi to everybody here, and thank you so much for inviting me. This is a really exciting forum, and it's a pleasure to be here with you, John, as well. Do you mind if I just talk a second about public health?
I don't mind at all.
Because anybody here working currently in public health? Let's see. So I've worked all my life in public health, and just a little bit about public health, because a lot of people think of public health, they think of publicly funded health care. And that's kind of a misnomer. Some of my colleagues do that, and there's a very small portion of the portfolio of work that we do in the LA County Department of Public Health, which is publicly the safety net for immunizations and communicable disease control. But a large portion of what we're doing today and what we're working on is creating conditions in communities to make sure people don't get sick in the first place. And thinking about, if we just give an example of chronic diseases, the sort of top reasons that people die in this county have to do with heart disease and lung cancer and other chronic conditions. And if we think about how we prevent those, part of it has to do with making sure people have access to healthy food, that they have a place that they can exercise, that they have information about the harms that smoking does, things like that. Those are the kinds of things that we work on, and part of our problem in doing that is that not every community has access to the same resources. And so a lot of what we're working on these days is what we are diving into health equity and making sure that the conditions exist so that everybody has access to those conditions to make sure that they live a healthy life. And as in public health we delve into that, one of the big things we realize up front is we can't do that work alone. We aren't the people that are planning the cities. We aren't the people that are deciding where the grocery stores go or who sells healthy food where. There are issues around safety. We don't run the safety systems in the county. Law enforcement does. So we have to partner with all these other sectors if we want to see a difference in life expectancy in this county, if we want to see a difference in the outcomes of those diseases, because that's our job in public health, is to reduce the rate of heart disease, to reduce diabetes, to reduce those things, the kinds of things so that people can live longer and live healthier lives. So from the beginning, cross-sectoral partnerships is what we do in public health because we can't get anything done unless we do that. And I recall, coming back to your question, about 10 years ago, I was meeting in one of the board offices. I used to run the maternal, child, and adolescent health programs, and I was meeting in one of the board offices and was introduced to a man named Richard Atlas. And you know this story, but Richard Atlas runs a small family foundation, and he says, so what do you do? And I talked to him a little bit about what we're doing in maternal, child, and adolescent health, and he said, gee, I know about 10 other funders that are funding programs for that are trying to improve the lives of young children and families, and wouldn't it be great if we all got together and learned about what you were doing in the county, because you've got a lot more money that you're investing in improving the lives of young children and families. What if we all got together and kind of met each other and started, learning together? And I said, oh, I'm in. Again, I can't do this work by myself. I'm not gonna be able to achieve my goals unless I partner with others. So we get together and we started, having these meetings where we would just share what each other was doing. We started to educate each other about the issues that were most important to us. And I learned a lot from my partners in philanthropy. And those of you that are working in philanthropy, this is second nature to you. But one of the things that I learned early on is that the way in which my philanthropic partners were investing in issues or investing in communities or investing in organizations was very different from the way I was investing in government. So for them it was about the relationship. They weren't just investing in the issue or investing in the people, the organization, but they were investing in the people that they believed could make a difference in this work. And not only were they giving them funding for whatever the program was that they were doing, but they were funding in the success of that agency and that person by bringing in other partners that could help them creating connections and relationships that would support that agency or support the work that they were doing on a particular issue. That kind of funding isn't the kind of funding we do in government. We get funding for an issue and we invest in it and we work out you're going to give us the X widgets for whatever we're doing. It's a very different kind of funding. So it was an eye-opener for me in the way in which philanthropy works very differently from the way we do in the government sector. So I sort of see it as like this, what I call the bear and the butterfly. The bear is the government. We're big, we're bulky, we roar a lot. We got a lot of funding though. And the butterfly is, one of the good things is that we've got a lot of that funding. And when we invest it, we can make huge differences. The butterfly part about it is the agility, the fastness, the ability to be creative and to try a million different things and see what works, and then hopefully the bear can invest in those things that in philanthropy has shown us that can be more impactful. So what I learned from working with Richard Atlas was we could be joint investors in an issue or in a community or what we were trying to do. I could bring my funding, and there are things that I just can't fund that he could fund much more easily, or his partners could fund, or he'd say, hey, I know 2 or 3 other people that might be interested in, let me bring them to the table. The other thing is that we together could raise our voice on policy issues. So that's another thing that I think is so important. We could come together. I may not be able to fund any of this work, but my partners could, and we could raise our voices around policy issues and the kind of change that we'd want to see happen together. And then together, by the different ways in which we invest, the different ways in which we can raise our voices, we can have a much greater impact on our communities. So just quickly on part 2 of your question, which was, what have I liked about the center? So the center, and you mentioned one of the big issues, has to do with supporting our work around home visitation. When I started this work 10, 15, 20 years ago, I said, gee, wouldn't it be great if we could invest more in having services and supports available for families in those critical times of need. Because we did early on some surveys of families, and the number one thing that they said was, we don't know where to get things when we need them all the time. It's not always obvious, and sometimes when we're trying to get them from your government sectors, because you're not working cross-sectorally, that you're working in silos, we can't figure out how we get what when we need it. And so I said, if we could invest in some home visitation services that, and create sort of a patchwork of services that would help families, from those that need a lot of deep help in our Nurse Family Partnership, a program that helps raise families out of poverty, helps to change the trajectory of the life of those mothers, young first-time mothers living in poverty, changes the trajectory of their life, the trajectory of their children, reduces child abuse, increases participation in the economic sector and education. So we were able to expand that through the partnership with the center, and it was because you understood how important this was, but also, and I don't think it's taken it for granted, being able to set the table and be the convener, bring people together. And the center could do that for us, to set that table, bring the right partners because they're willing to come to the table, and then to be an advocate for the issues that we care most about for our children and families. So it's been an incredible asset to our work.
Thank you.
Public health.
I really appreciate that. All right, so more on that, but first, let me turn it over to John. So same basic question to you from your perspective. What's the advantage from the private sector of partnering with the government? And then the same part two, what's the value then for them having a center to help
Yeah,
do
thank
it?
you, and I just want to say thanks to Pete, Jamie, and Cindy and Kate for being here, and Jonathan. My heart rate has gone down now after the presentation. I feel a little calmer now, but appreciated your words. CCF, California Community Foundation, is 104 years old, focused on LA County. It's one of the oldest institutions of its kind in the United States. It's the 29th largest grant maker in the United States, so Gates is #1, we're 29th, so we're pretty big. But we're focused on LA, and one of the things we do that's interesting about community foundations, it's different than a private foundation, is we're a fundraising foundation. We bring in new assets. We manage today almost 1,700 foundations and funds, and we have to bring in, at a kind of a minimum, $200 million in new assets a year, so we're at about $250 million a year. We grant out about $200 million a year. So every 4 years, 5 years, we're granting out $1 billion. So we're, in the philanthropy world, reasonably good size, but even with those numbers, which are impressive numbers, they're just dwarfed in compared to government. And until we can leverage what we do and be a catalyst for change and help our donors and our funders and the funds that we have, leverage those things in a way that makes the most sense for change. And change is not just doing little experiments, a little prototyping. It's about getting the policy. It's about doing real advocacy. It's about making a difference at scale. And it takes trust. It takes trust in terms of the partnership. So entering into a serious public-private partnership is not for the faint of heart. It is somebody, we think of things, we have 10-year strategic plans because nobody would take 25-year plans seriously. Because we don't think in 5 years, because 5 years is a joke to us at our foundation. Because we're not going to solve homelessness, we're not going to deal with education, we're not going to deal. It doesn't mean we're putting it off, but to make the milestone changes that need to be made, we have to get footholds on the mountain. And when Kate was made the head of this center, and we had some work with the city of Los Angeles and working with the city of LA trying to develop this concept, we knew that this was a great opportunity, particularly with the Blue Ribbon Commission, which we participated in and saw, and we know Richard Atlas, and we saw there was an opportunity. It's just, I'm going to talk a little bit about this in a few minutes, but the landscape of LA is, while we're the biggest county, the poorest county, we're the most underfunded county in the United States on a per capita basis, based on the federal government, the state government, and philanthropy. The Gates Foundation has yet to make a grant in LA County, the poorest county in the world, at least in our world, in the United States. So anyway, we have challenges. And if our sector doesn't step up and try to work together to make change, to collaborate in a way that makes sense, we're just going to be, in the words of Jonathan, we're just going to be salary-wise. Lots of 1,000 points of light, lots of good stuff happening independently. And it makes no sense when you're looking at the challenges that we face in this county. So we're engaged on a whole variety of levels with the county right now and the city. We fund positions both at the county and the city as a philanthropic entity. we're going to the very edges of our nonprofit status, and we have to measure that because there's IRS regulations regarding that. And we call ourselves an activist foundation today. So we're not thinking, there's one thing about being in philanthropy, and it feels good, and we want to feel less guilty about the world. But really it's about whether or not you're going to put your chips down to make a difference. We made a very substantial change. Our board did have the courage to say, we're going to get fully engaged in this thing. This is an all-in moment. This is not, hey, let's experiment and do this as a hobby. Let's go all in. And that's what our board decided to do a number of years ago. And so we created a new mission statement, which was to lead systemic change in Los Angeles. And we're not going to lead it alone. We're going to lead it with others. We're going to be collaborative. LA today, we love to hear about what's happening in the Bay Area and the Silicon Valley, which doesn't exist in the United States. It's just a concept. But is, we like to be compared to the Northern California folks, but in reality, that's where I was born and raised. The reality is LA is much more collaborative in terms of the philanthropic space today, in terms of trying to get things done. And it's because we have a lot of challenges. So we looked at it, and so what we hire, how we engage in things, is totally different in terms of the people that we engage in our partnerships, the way we think about our strategy, how we invest our dollars. So let me just say one other thing about this, which is related, is we have obviously money, but we have money, not just grants that we can make, which we make those grants, and we try to be catalytic and help accelerate things. But today we're the largest lender in LA County for nonprofits. So we are a bank to start to do money to put on the line to get an ROI for different entities. So we're the biggest nonprofit lender to the permanent supportive housing work right now, today in Los Angeles County. We're a lender to First Five right now. We're a lender to charter schools. We're lending where there's gaps in capital to make things go. So when I say we're working with the county or the city, and many cities, but we're working with the city of El Monte. We had a 10-year investment in the city of El Monte. We established the El Monte Promise Initiative in El Monte. We're doing a lot of different things, but the challenge for philanthropy is very restricted, finite resources, and to place bets that help advance the risk capacity of government to take some chances. Because we can just invest in what is tried and true, and government can do that well. And there are a lot of good people in government, a lot of people trying to do the best they can, but they're hampered by the limitations and the restrictions and the laws and regulations of their resources. And so philanthropy can be, on the sidelines, a faster way of making a difference.
So, all right.
I have a question.
Go for it.
Can I jump in?
No, Jonathan, I was complimenting you so we don't have to talk.
No, I'm actually really fascinated by the activist part. And maybe everybody else in the room, I'm new, like maybe it's obvious to people. When you talk about pushing on the activist envelope, I'm just curious what that looks like in practice, but also how does that change your relationships with partners, if at all? Have you noticed as you've taken a more activist posture, does it impact at all who comes to the table?
Let me just give you a couple of examples of where we kind of gone to the edge. Historically, 104 years old, we've never endorsed any kind of measures that are on the ballot. So now we were the number 2 funder of Proposition H. That was to get permanent supportive housing support for, and so we did all the polling for Triple H. So we're funding the polling for a ballot measure. We endorse those ballot measures. We put our name on them. So that's going to a different place for a foundation. We're looking right now at the amendment to Prop 13 and communities and schools, which is the new, which just qualified for the ballot for 2020. We're looking at a variety of different things that are putting us in a very different place to advance a conversation. It does change the way people view us. Obviously, we need to get donors in, and not all of our donors agree with everything we're doing. But one of the things we agree on is that we're interconnected. This thing about cross-sector, I'll just say is, it's nice to put a label on it, but we're all in a cross-sector moment. We've been in a cross-sector moment, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. We're at these different sectors, and we have to acknowledge that opportunity to be connected to those things. And we decided as a foundation that we could just go along grow our assets. One of the things we did, for example, I'll just tell you one thing we did is we said, we could be like other foundations, say, let's get to this X number of assets. Let's just grow to get these assets. We turned assets and we said, how many dollars are we going to put in the community? So we started making commitments to grants, which is, we want to make $1 billion in grants in the next 10 years to LA County, which would be about a 70% increase for us. So when you turn everything on its head like that, it just changes the way you do that. But our relationships with donors, our relationship with partners overall have been enhanced because our reputation, our brand, if you will, has come out of the shadows and said, we stand for something. Because if you don't stand for something, you're falling for anything.
Yes.
So, I used to run philanthropy for a company in LA, and I agree with you, it's very collaborative. The SoCal grant makers and everything else, but the thing that was always, where I think was missing was you didn't have enough of the C-suite leaders from the companies at all these gatherings. You might have the head of philanthropy, you might have the head of, some part of the community engagement, but you didn't have the CEOs, didn't have the heads of HR, didn't have, and I felt like that was really missing. So you didn't necessarily have the business where your investments were tied to creating conditions for the business community to really make some major investments in Los Angeles and Southern California. I guess I just wanted your perspective on that.
And Cindy, you might also have something to offer in terms of community and what you're seeing.
Well, let me just comment and I'll turn it over to you. I mean, I don't think you can expect in sort of one-time gatherings you're ever going to make that difference. These are investments in time and relationships that create this change. That's what I learned from the meeting with Richard Atlas. I didn't really finish the story, but we ended up forming the LA Partnership for Early Childhood Investment, which has been ongoing for over 10 years. And it's all the funders that are working on early childhood investment. But it took years to pull that together, lots of conversations, building the trust, and having lots of meetings where, we basically said, okay, well, what could we do together? And let's have some small wins. So I think the first thing is just, it takes some time to build the relationships and to make sure you get the right people to the table. And it helps to have a center who can figure out who the right people to get to the table are, and that it has a little bit of oomph to get them there.
So I'm going to jump out of the moderator role for just half a second, and John, I'll turn it over to you. So I wasn't here this morning because I have a bit of a fire drill in working with Cindy's boss, Department of no, it's all good. But she has a personal passion around decreasing the disparity in Black infant mortality. And we had some meetings, and she said, Kate, we're just getting program officers into a room, which is terrific, but what I really want to do is get the CEOs into a room because I want to be able to have a conversation. And she's new to LA, so she doesn't have the relationships. So part of what we offered to do in the center is first see if we could get Holly Mitchell there. We were successful in getting Holly Mitchell, the senator from the state of California, who helped to bring $8 million to this issue. And then we've hand-selected a number of CEOs from foundations who care about this issue, ghost drafting an email for her to be able to send out to them, to be able to get those right high-level people in the room. We don't do that for every single issue, but this is an issue that is particularly important. We know that there are foundation leaders who care about this issue. And so for this, we will be bringing that group of people together to figure out. And she's not walking in with a proposal. She's walking in with a problem and some ideas about how she wants to solve it, asking her friends in the private sector, asking our friends in the private sector to join with her in co-creating the solutions.
So this is, it's a very different part of the question, but it's critical, I think. LA, I think we have 2 Fortune 500 companies in LA County now. I mean, Disney and ACOM. I mean, I don't know. We have just a lot of small companies. When you look at the Chamber of Commerce, the Central City Association, BizFed, whatever you want to look at, LA Business Council, we're a microcosm of a lot of micro things. And so the CEOs of the bigger companies, right? Some of this is, one thing is to get involved with philanthropy, one thing is to get involved with the politics and the advocacy. And just like private foundations, like I say, they're not showing up to these meetings either. Some of the private foundations do not want to have anything to do with this work that we're talking about, some of them. So how do we get the CEOs more involved? How do we bring them to a table? The CEOs themselves? I'm not exactly sure. It's a very good question because CCF is, what we do is, we have a convening center. We're fairly a neutral table for both, all the sectors. And we try to bring people, in addition to what SEG does, and I sit on the board of SEG, Southern California grant makers. And we are trying to get the CEO or the C-suite into a room. And it's not that they don't want to, I'm just saying it's not easy to, what are the incentives to get them to the table? And to be perfectly frank, when we look at corporate giving right now, because I sit on the Center for Public Policy and Philanthropy at USC, we're studying corporate giving in LA, and corporate giving is going down. Corporate actual dollars of giving is actually going down. Philanthropy, in terms of hours volunteered and all the other things, that is going up. But actual dollars is going down in LA. It's going down a lot of places. So there's a lot of challenges associated with getting the C-suite into a room. I'd love to hear, if you have ideas at some point, maybe it's not right now, but I'd love to hear what you think about. There are other people in the room. But it's not for without trying, but we gotta do a better job.
Questions?
I'm curious, trust has obviously been a big theme here today. Thank you. And I think many people have spoken to kind of the interpersonal connection of trust. The three of you certainly can sit in a room and develop trust yourselves, but you also represent really big organizations. And so how are you able to, say on behalf of the county or on behalf of the department or even on behalf of the foundation, institutionalize that trust? And in a way that your word and your name at those meetings is kind of backed up by the trust of your entire organization, and try and limit the times where your building of those relationships is undermined by maybe other members of your organization. It's an easy one.
Yeah, that's not an easy question. I mean, I think, just speaking for myself, you know, understanding how important trust is and understanding when I go into a room, I'm representing the Department of Public Health in every aspect. And many times I'm representing the county and government whether I want to or not. And knowing the limits that I have is what I can say and what I can't say in terms of, you know, I can't take a political position on behalf of the county that's in counter to our Board of Supervisors, and that's death, right? So it's just sort of the reality. So I think, you know, for me, it's being true to the issues and being true to what I can represent and being as honest as possible in all of those situations. And training my staff about that. I mean, that's, I think, the only thing. But I'm not going to say there haven't been instances where, you know, somebody did undermine that trust of our organization because they weren't on board with what we were trying to do. But the more we work together, the more we explain where we're headed, the more we share that vision and everybody's buying into it, and build that trust by taking the time to have the relationships and spending time with each other, the better it gets.
For us, just briefly, is you know, it's very humbling, to be honest with you. And if you're willing to be humbled by the realities, one of the things that we had to do, and we did this in El Monte, we came in there, top down, philanthropy, we're gonna fix it, we got a lot of money, just listen to us, don't get caught up in any other stuff, we have the answers. And we got humbled very, very deeply in El Monte, and then we had to step back. We formed a new partnership with the city council and the city manager. They were going through changes, we were going through changes. And the board had to say, are we really willing to go that deep into this thing? Because we're just gonna give them some money and, you know, put a smiling face on some of this stuff. That's not what we thought, but it was gonna be easy. And once you get into this stuff, the ground truth of it, and to establish real relationships at the ground level, to have every single one of our initiatives now has advisory boards, and our staff hates it, right? But it is the only way to get things done. And to have a sense of what's going on, have lived experience in the room. We're not talking about homelessness as an abstract concept. People are really homeless. People are working with the homeless. It's not just something we're gonna solve in a philanthropic boardroom. So once you have to get to that, so when we formed, for example, just to give you one example, when we formed the Immigrant Integration Council, which has 80 members 9 years ago, it meets monthly for the last 9 years. And you just imagine the roller coaster ride we've been on for immigration. And that has the business community at it, and it has the private sector and public sector and funders. And going on that road, we have a lot of trust in that room right now. That is a well of trust to say now, we're going to, when we started the Deportation Defense Fund, the LA Justice Fund in December of 2016, a month after the election, and Mayor Garcetti was on that podium with us, to say we're gonna defend people that are being deported in this country so they have legal representation. That was a fairly brave move. We didn't do that because we're just CCF. We did that because we had 80 people behind us who said, wow, we got some real challenges from the ground level that's reality-based. Does it have consequences? Go back to the reputational questions, go back to the relationship, yeah. But are we based in reality? And if you're open to be humbled by that reality, like you're wrong, like you don't know what you're talking about, like the truth is nothing like you thought it was, then trust comes, that the currency of trust becomes something that's much stronger.
You also asked how we institutionalize it. I mean, that's part of what we try and do in the center. And the reality is, it can't quite fully be institutionalized, but I love the idea that 500 people in the country could solve that problem. So we are the largest county in the entire country, and we have an incredibly large philanthropic community. I don't know what the number of people is, but it's a notable number. And so part of what we do in the center is bring folks together so that they can build trust with each other. And part of what we do, this sounds a little funny, is we coach them. So when I have, I said $4 million co-invested between the public and the private sector, not a penny of it going to the county, or not a penny of it going to the county, but 100% of it going to leverage something the county wants to do. Before the center will bring our county partners to a private sector partner, we kick the tires. We make sure that our county, because we know that trust is so important, so we make sure that what the county is interested in doing is something that the private sector is interested in. And then vice versa, we make sure, and John epitomizes it, we make sure that our private sector partners come in with the right level of humility and understanding that, like, just because you do it one way in the private sector doesn't mean that my county family can do it quite the way that you want to do it. Yes.
This is a question for John. John, I'm fascinated by the fact that you are an asset-generating philanthropy. I have a sort of meta question that hopefully will speak to today's theme. When you are courting new donors to contribute assets, how much are you going beyond just the, we want your cash, your capital, and are you going to, and you are a business leader, or you are, you have a capability that you can leverage other than money in a cross-sector sense. Is it intentional, or does it sort of just organically happen? I mean, you spoke to it in your last answer a little bit, where obviously some of your donors would maybe end up as advisors, but are you actually seeking out new donors for not just their money, but for the cross-sector leadership that you bring to the table?
Yeah, it's a complex answer, because, and I'm going to address this briefly, and I get a chance to talk a little bit later, but most donors, with all due respect, most funders, I mean, I have meetings 3 times a week with prospective donors and their advisors, and they have a lot of advisors, and their advisors have a lot of opinions. These conversations are not about the destination of their philanthropy. It is about the structure of their philanthropy. It is about the fees. It is about the business deal. And then what I do is I take them through a passion diagnostic. And the passion diagnostic is totally a neutral process to say, you should define your philanthropy. And so we go through that process that takes a couple hours, or it takes many years. So that's just one, that's another side. So people know us now. Our reputation is going out there that we're doing stuff. People didn't know we existed for many, many years. So that helps us, and it raises questions for certain people. But I would say less than 5% of the new donors that come to us, of the 7,000 gifts that we got last year, 5%, I'm just guessing off the top of my head, are like, wow, I want to help you do what you're doing. Most of it is about, because they're pretty large deals. When you're talking about $250 million a year, they're not coming in $1,000 checks. These are large structured deals, and do we have the chops to make the deal happen, and are we going to help them do what they want to do? And we just got a fund that's 100% for peregrine falcons. It's not for birds, it's for peregrine falcons. And so we're going to help them be very successful with peregrine falcons. But so if you just reserve
it back to them, are you going to say, and here's, besides writing us a check, here's what you can do for peregrine falcons? You have a network that we also leverage.
Yes, we will help them with that. But I'm just saying, it's not that has something to do with LA. There's a lot of peregrine falcons in LA, which I'm beginning to learn. But what I'm saying is that is not exactly on our top 5,000 things that we're thinking about right now. But we're also about the donor really coming to terms with their own passions and their own ideas. They may wake up one morning, probably, hey, peregrine falcons isn't all what I thought it was going to be. Maybe I should be doing something else. That's a different conversation, right? But, we're not selling the change because it's too easy to make rich people feel guilty, right? That's not a really good strategy. It's about trying to help them understand where their philanthropy is based and how that's done.
Well, I have a question on the, we just commissioned a study within Ventura County on 50, it was actually 53 of our county's largest philanthropists. And what I found very interesting, and they spent about an hour to 2 hours each giving their feedback over the course of a year. And what I found very interesting is that over 50% of them did not know if they were having any impact at all in their investments. None. It was a scale of like, do you not know, to I know extremely well. And they were, over half were right here. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts on how we can do a better job communicating that and what your own experiences is like in this collaboration.
Let's have this question and discussion at my session, which is the philanthropy. Because what I've done is I've kind of shifted the panel a little bit. I want to, if we could come back, and Vanessa, if we could have that in the next session. Because I want to come back to this thought, and maybe there's other questions about this partnership. I just want to say a couple things about this partnership. This is also an opportunity because the counties, the majority on the Board of Supervisors has changed the dimensions of what partnerships can be and opening doors to different kinds of conversation. That doesn't mean people were against it before. It's just a different era. It's also contributed by the context that we're living in right now and the fact that Los Angeles County, if you look at every measurable thing about vulnerability, we have the largest population in the United States. So it's a challenging time. And we talk about inequity a lot, but this county has the greatest inequity right now. So there's opportunities for partnership, for cross-sector work that is unprecedented. And I think what our little foundation and other foundations are seeing with the leadership of Cindy and Kate and the Board of Supervisors and a host of other people that are in their offices is there's an opening to thinking about different kinds of partnerships and different kinds of relationships that we have never seen before. Because CCF in its history has only been doing these kinds of partnerships with the county for a few years, to be perfectly frank. We wouldn't have done it before because of what was happening and our perception of what was happening. We were probably wrong in those perceptions, but the opportunities and the context have enabled us to explore that further.
I will just add, I don't know that you were wrong, because I think that you are right that the change in leadership in Los Angeles County has opened up partnerships. It's a huge deal that they have made this center a permanent unit within the County of Los Angeles. Like, that wouldn't have happened 5 or 6 years ago. There's an openness to partnering with the private sector within Los Angeles County that I think is different. I mean, Cindy was able to create some magic in Department of Public Health, but she and they are unique. It's interesting to see it now get institutionalized. And what I would say to your donors is, and I forget if it was Pete who said this, that this is a model that can be replicated. There was a study that was done about this. It's not rocket science. And what I say to my friends in philanthropy who are thinking about doing joint initiatives with us, which is what the term that we use for deals, like deals between the public and the private sector, like to support home visiting, is we're like your financial advisor. We're going to help your money go further. There was a $20,000 investment from this foundation called RISA to help put together an implementation guide to help this this pilot in South Los Angeles that I described. That $20,000 investment turned into a one-page advocacy piece, which was then part of what Department of Public Social Services used to lobby in Sacramento to get the governor to sign $50 million that now comes back to allow us to expand this money, to expand this program countywide.
So I'm struck by a couple of different comments. So Jonathan, in your talk, you talked about you better be doing the thing because otherwise it's too late, right? And then we just had a little conversation about a combination of both the skill and the will, right? And the will is the part that's the really hard part to do. And I think that for people that are doing cross-sector work, you often feel like you're Sisyphus pushing that ball uphill, right? So there are the things that you do that are your motivators to yourself, however you do your self-care, how you get to keep your eye on the prize. And I think that there's more research and such that's around how to help keep you motivated if you're trying to achieve something that's really hard to do. But I wonder, if you were to have to put a recipe together of how to create will in other people. Karen this morning talked about power, trust, knowledge as pieces. But I think you talked about the opening with the LA County supervisors. Like, there was an opening, right? Obviously, we're living in very complicated times right now. But how do you help evangelize or motivate will from the unwilling that have the power?
I'll let you know when I have that problem. Because honestly, and this actually, thank you for asking that
And I'm
question.
asking this too because has working with the fellows and hearing all the challenges that this amazing group of people are doing, like it's easy to coach them and say, oh, try this, try that, but there's this will thing is sometimes really hard because people are stuck in their ego and the thing that they think they have the answer, and so
I think that's true.
unleashing will.
Let me just give it a little context from the center's perspective, but really I think this is a great question for both Cindy and for John, because I get to deal with the folks who are willing. And right now, in our 2.5 years, the biggest problem the center has is too much need, too much demand, too many people saying, oh my gosh, I really want to have my $20,000 can have that impact, or the public sector. Oh, wait a minute, we have a private sector that's really willing to help us do what we want to do. So we're still at the center in a place where we've got people flooding in. But I know underneath the surface, Cindy, you must work with folks in Department of Public Health who are a little resistant. And John, you work with folks in the private sector who have a little bit of difficulty working with the county. So what's your perspective on that?
I think it's a really good question, and I'm gonna, for the most part, we're sort of the cheerleaders in public health. We're like, yay, let's get together, let's figure this out, and we'll help set the table, we'll make sure everybody has enough chairs. So we're really generally the cheerleaders on that. But I'm going to give you an example. It's a microcosm of this. Okay, I was running a program for a while, and it was a jointly run program between maternal, child, and adolescent health and environmental health. Environmental health, that time, this is about 12 years ago, they were into check marks, did we, regulators, did we check this, is this, up to speed, and if it's not, I'm gonna write you kind of a citation because you're not up to speed. And maternal, child, and health, we were like the nurses and taking care of and nurturing. And I had to convince this other guy to give me 3/4 of his budget and one person to work under me because I had a better vision of where this was going. And I figured, how am I going to get this guy to do this? And I started figuring out, what is it that he's happy about? What is it makes him happy? What does he like? He likes to eat lunch. He was a very hefty guy, and his favorite part of day for him was eating lunch. And so I figured, I'm going to start eating lunch with him, whether he wants to have lunch with me or not. And so I would just show up at lunchtime, hey, you want to have lunch? And bring my lunch, sit down at his table. And for the probably 3/4 of the year, he was an Eeyore about it, like, kind of grumbling. And pretty soon he started coming around because I started figuring out what he cared about, what was important, and he started to believe and trust in me. That I wasn't trying to undercut him, but that my goal was to improve things for our communities and the families we were serving, and that it was better served if that money was in my budget because I could match it better, because I could bring more resources to the table, and then I needed that person that was working for him to work for me so that I could make it all happen. It's just a microcosm of the kind of things that we do on a large level with organizations as we figure out what they're trying to do and what we're trying to do, how we're both going to do this together, and understanding why they're taking the positions they're taking, figuring out how maybe we can have lunch together or something, whatever it is, that makes it so they'll trust us and that so we can begin to understand where each other's coming from. But I don't think it's easy, and it's much harder on an organization to organization level than it is on a person to person, but in the end, those organizations are people, and we got to figure out how we can get them to work together.
Yeah, there's a lot of thoughts I have on this, but one of the things I'll just tell you on the side of the foundation in terms of how we hire, for example, there's a lot of people that want to, they come to us and we interview literally thousands of people every year, and they want to make a difference in the world and want more meaning and fulfillment, and they say all these words. And the thing, we get the highly competent, overeducated people come to us. And the test that we have is prove to us that you have a clear understanding of the passion for the work. And if we think about the passion for the work, it's not just I love it and I care about it and I really want to feel good about it. The passion, as we all know, the word passion comes from passio, and means to suffer. I mean, do you understand the depth and breadth of what we're talking about? Because this is going to take a while. And if you're not an athlete that's a marathoner and you're a sprinter, you're not going to like it. So we're just not interested in you. Because if you're just a skeeter that's coming through here for a couple years and to skeet out somewhere else, it's not really the place for you. So first of all, we have to have the right people on the bus, if you will, on that side of it, right? And then when you're talking to people that have had 20 to 30 years on the other side, look, you weren't here when that legislation passed. You know, you want to solve homelessness next week. Let me tell you, it's a complicated thing. You need people on both sides of that to have that conversation and a willingness. We're right now doing briefings for reporters on immigration. We brought them all in a room. We said, what do you know about immigration? Oh, we know a lot. Okay, we're going to test you, if you don't mind. Because they didn't know the history of LA. And you can't report on these things unless you have contextual knowledge and a depth and breadth of interest in that. So we said, we're going to do basically showrunners for you. We're going to surround you with knowledge. You pick what you think's good, and you take your style. So the thing is, the people that are in the room, right? These are not just people that say they want to make change and have some abstract knowledge about solutions. These are committed players for the long term. So that's something that's really important. And when we were an advocate for not just Kate, but for the center, because way beyond Kate. And we want Kate to be successful. We want a center that gets embedded in an institution and where foundations say, this is the way we do business now. This is not just some unusual, nice project. And that's, you gotta lift your head up and look at the longer arc. And until we have people that can do the baton passing to help people think about the longer arc of this, again, I'm not just saying about patience, it's about endurance. Because it's so easy to be frustrated. I'm sitting on a county task force that I will remain nameless. That I've gone
It's
to,
not with Cindy.
It's not with Cindy, and I've been in 11 meetings, and I want to know what we're doing, and I seem like a nice guy, but I'm not that nice, actually. And so it's frustrating, but how do we hang in there? And I sat down with the new head of the department, and I said, you know, I'm not going anywhere. You know, I don't totally agree with what you're doing, but I'm not going anywhere. I want to work with you, and I want to make this thing successful. So what is it going to do to make this thing successful? Because there's going to be somebody, I'm going to leave, somebody's going to be right after me. And we're going to hand it off to them. And they looked at me and they said, okay, let's go. So that's a different mindset than let's solve problems, right?
Sorry, we're gonna have to go ahead and wrap it up.